My name is Alara Monroe. Unusual name, I know. My mom said she saw it in a dream and claimed it meant strength and elegance. I grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina, but after grad school, I chased opportunity across state lines, eventually landing a job in Chicago, Illinois, at a fast-growing PR firm called Slate and Vine Strategies. It was sleek, competitive, and filled with overachievers who thrived on caffeine, corporate politics, and backhanded compliments. I was one of them. But unlike most of the other sharks in the building, I didn't climb the ladder by stepping on necks. I worked hard, really hard. Over the past 6 years, I'd built a solid reputation as the firm's most reliable strategist, especially when it came to crisis control and political reputation management. My client roster was a goldmine, a U.S. senator, 2 Fortune 500 CEOs, and a luxury brand that had once been on the brink of cancellation until I pulled them back from the edge. I'd saved jobs. I'd saved reputations. And I thought, just maybe, I'd earned a little loyalty along the way. Turns out, loyalty doesn't mean much when someone wants what you have. Enter Brielle Atwood. Brielle was the kind of woman who turned heads without trying. Blonde, polished, Ivy League educated with a networking Rolodex longer than my resume. She joined Slate and Vine 3 years after I did and rose through the ranks like smoke slipping through a crack in the ceiling, fast, effortless, almost invisible. But unlike most people I've worked with in cutthroat environments, she didn't bother hiding the claws under her silk gloves. She was charming, yes, but calculated. The kind of friend who always knew just a little too much about you, and just enough to weaponize it when needed. Still, I let her in. We weren't best friends, but we were work friends, and that's a category that can be even more dangerous. We got drinks after big client wins, exchanged gossip by the Keurig, and once even went on a weekend trip to Lake Geneva. When my dad passed away 2 years ago, she sent flowers and covered for me during a major client pitch. I thought she had my back. I really thought she had my back. So when I was up for Senior Director of Strategic Accounts, I wasn't just confident, I was practically floating. Everyone knew the promotion was mine. I'd mentored junior staff, brought in over $9 million in new accounts that year alone, and, perhaps most importantly, I had Rick Stanton, our managing partner, in my corner. He'd even hinted as much during my quarterly review, "Keep this momentum going, Alara, and we're talking next-level leadership." So I kept the momentum going. But then, it all unraveled. And fast. The week before the promotion was to be announced, I noticed Brielle acting strange. Distant. Cautious. She'd started asking oddly specific questions during client meetings, probing about my strategies, requesting access to decks I usually presented myself. I chalked it up to curiosity or overzealousness. But on Friday morning, I walked into the executive conference room for what I thought was my promotion announcement, and walked out with a tight smile pasted across my face while the rest of the office congratulated Brielle on her new title as Senior Director. My stomach turned. I smiled. I clapped. I told her I was proud of her. Then I locked myself in a stall in the women's bathroom and stared at my reflection until the tears burned away. Later that day, I confronted Rick, hoping, praying, there had been a mistake. But his answer was diplomatic and cold. It was a tough call. Brielle showed a bit more initiative in some recent pitches. "You've done amazing work, Alara. This just wasn't your time." Not my time? It felt like someone had stripped the skin off my career and left the bones to bleach under fluorescent office lights. Still, I could have swallowed the loss, maybe. If I hadn't found out how she got the promotion. That night, over drinks with a trusted colleague named Jordan, I got the truth. Brielle had been feeding Rick confidential internal strategy notes I'd drafted over the past 6 months. She pitched my exact rebranding concept to a high-profile airline client days before I was scheduled to present it. She'd whispered that I had trouble balancing leadership and execution and even pulled emails out of context to make it seem like I'd been missing deadlines, which, for the record, I hadn't. Every piece of sabotage had been done under the guise of collaboration. I had been betrayed by someone who wore my secrets like jewelry and used them to decorate her rise to the top. And that's when something in me broke. This wasn't just a professional setback. It was war. I decided right then that if Brielle wanted to play dirty, I'd play smarter. Cooler. And far, far more destructively. Because if she was going to build her new title on lies and stolen work, I'd dismantle the illusion brick by brick, until there was nothing left of her shiny new empire but the truth. And that truth? It was going to blow up her career faster than she ever saw coming. When I left the office that Friday evening, the chill of a Chicago spring scraped against my skin like betrayal. I remember walking along Wacker Drive, the river glinting under the city lights, trying to decide what kind of woman I wanted to be next. The version of me who trusted people easily? She was gone. The version who believed merit mattered more than manipulation? Also gone. What was left was precision. I wasn't going to blow up Brielle's career in one dramatic move. No, she didn't deserve that kind of clean ending. I wanted her to feel the slow creep of doubt. I wanted her to lose sleep wondering how the ground had started to shift beneath her heels. I wanted her to unravel, publicly. So I began where I always do, with research. Brielle had underestimated me in the worst way. She thought because I was kind, I was soft. Because I didn't play dirty, I didn't know how. But I'd been working crisis control for politicians and CEOs for nearly a decade. I'd cleaned up messes with less than 48 hours before a press conference. If there was one thing I knew how to do, it was uncover secrets and weaponize truth. I started with her digital footprint. Using nothing more than her work laptop, which we occasionally swapped for presentations, and my access to the internal server, I took a peek through cached files, shared folders, and Slack conversations. Within 2 hours, I found 3 things that sent my stomach flipping in satisfaction. A Google Doc draft, a full pitch outline dated 2 days before she officially got the airline client project. It was a copy-paste job from the confidential slides I'd been working on. Even the font was the same. A Slack message to Rick Stanton saying, "I'd been helping Alara clean up some of her decks. Think she's a bit overwhelmed, might be something to keep an eye on." A forwarded internal email thread between me and a junior associate, where she added commentary in red text to make it look like I'd missed a deadline I'd actually already completed. She was good. But not good enough to cover her tracks with me watching. I downloaded copies, added timestamps, and backed them up to an encrypted USB drive I kept on my keychain. I wasn't ready to show my hand yet. First, I needed more. A pattern. A deeper crack in her mask. Next came the social web. See, Brielle had always been just a little too casual on LinkedIn. Braggy. She liked to post thought leadership articles she hadn't written, tag clients she wasn't officially assigned to, and spin vague achievements into headline material. Normally harmless. But now? It was fertile ground. I started tracking her posts against our internal project database and quickly noticed discrepancies. She claimed credit for a viral political rebrand I'd led in DC last fall. She also posted a behind-the-scenes photo from a product shoot she wasn't even present for, but her caption implied she'd run the entire operation. I archived it all. Screenshots. Timestamps. Public comments. By Monday morning, I had enough material to burn her world to ash. But I wasn't ready. Not yet. Because blowing up her credibility wasn't enough, I wanted to do it from the inside out. Make her allies doubt her. Make her think every compliment came with a knife. So I started my quiet campaign. Phase 1, subtle isolation. It started with water cooler whispers. Carefully curated concerns slipped into the right ears. I had lunch with Julia from HR and asked, innocently, if there'd been any reviews of team morale lately. Brielle's been getting so many high-profile assignments lately, I said with a half-smile. Some of the team feels sidelined. It's a tricky vibe right now. I casually mentioned to another senior associate that Brielle seemed spread thin. I wasn't even sure she had time to oversee her direct reports properly, I said. Just between us, of course. Then, I reached out to Marcus, a junior strategist Brielle often used to do her dirty work. He once told me she'd borrowed his client insights and didn't give him credit. So I fed his frustration. I asked him to collaborate on a mock proposal I was drafting for a side pitch. When Brielle heard he was working with me, she blew up in private. Perfect. Phase 2, light sabotage. I knew she had a big presentation coming up for a major tech client, Tech Crown. A $4 million retainer was on the line. The execs were notoriously finicky, and Brielle was planning to lead the strategy session herself. So, I accidentally sent an old version of the client intake brief to her assistant, who then passed it to Brielle. When she walked into the pitch meeting, her data was 2 weeks out of date, and the client noticed. She fumbled. Not dramatically. But enough. Rick called me afterward and said, "You should have handled that one." I just nodded and said, "Maybe next time." Phase 3, anonymous whispers. Using a fresh Gmail address, I sent an email to our internal ethics committee under the subject line, "Concerns about intellectual property misuse." I attached the timestamped documents and Slack messages, and signed, of course. Just enough to spark an internal audit. Just enough to make people start watching her a little more closely. By the end of that week, things had shifted. Brielle was edgy. Snapping at her team. Micromanaging meetings. I caught her glancing at me across the break room like I was a ghost she couldn't quite place. And Rick? He was watching both of us now. Good. The final trigger came 2 days later, when I received an anonymous message from a temp worker in IT, someone I'd once helped get an interview at another firm. He wrote, "Hey, Elara. Just FYI, someone's been trying to access your old shared folders from an unauthorized device. Looks like Brielle's credentials. Thought you'd want to know." That was it. She wasn't just a thief. She was still trying to steal from me. That night, I pulled out my encrypted drive, updated it with everything I'd gathered so far, and began preparing a formal presentation, not for a client, but for Rick Stanton himself. And when I walked into his office the next morning with a USB drive and a folder labeled Intel, Internal Breach of Ethics, I wasn't angry. I was calm. Because the next phase of my plan was detonation. I arrived at the office that morning with an almond milk latte in one hand and destruction in the other. The flash drive on my keychain felt heavier than usual, because today, it held something far more potent than files or notes. It held proof. It held power. Rick Stanton's office was perched on the 23rd floor, corner glass, plush furniture, a skyline view of Chicago that made every meeting feel like a movie scene. I knocked softly, and he barely looked up. "Elara." "Come in," he said, distracted as always, flipping through a printed quarterly report. "I need 15 minutes. No interruptions." "It's important," I said evenly. That got his attention. He set the folder down and raised an eyebrow. "Go on." I stepped forward and placed a slim, white folder on his desk, along with the USB. "What's this?" "Documentation. Digital and hard copy. I need you to review it, quietly. No calls." "No, let me get someone from compliance." "Not yet. Just you and me." He gave a skeptical smile. "Is this about Brielle?" I didn't answer. Instead, I clicked the USB into his laptop and opened the presentation I'd prepared, titled, "Breach of Trust, a Pattern of Misconduct Within Stanton PR." He leaned in. Slide by slide, I walked him through the digital evidence, screenshots of her pitch drafts matching my original files down to the metadata. A timeline overlay of Slack conversations with suspicious edits and misleading messages. Side-by-side comparisons of internal project credits versus her public LinkedIn claims. A brief analysis showing how her fraudulent project ownership led to internal confusion and misallocation of billable hours. When I finished, Rick sat there, unusually quiet, his fingers pressed together like a man trying to steady himself against a mental earthquake. "Jesus," he muttered. "She's not just ambitious," I said calmly. She's unethical. And dangerous. He closed the laptop and exhaled hard. You realize if I bring this up the chain, it could trigger a full internal review. Legal will want to investigate. This could hurt the firm's image. That's why I came to you first, I said. I'm not looking for a scandal. I'm looking for integrity. Rick glanced at me again, this time with something resembling respect. Maybe even fear. He knew what I could do if I wanted to. You want her fired? No. Not directly, I said. If you fire her, she plays victim. She spins it. She blames politics or jealousy. No. I want you to sideline her. Reassign her. Quietly launch the review. Let her dig her own grave. He studied me like I was a chessboard he hadn't expected to lose. All right, he said. But this stays between us. For now. Of course. And just like that, the slow collapse began. Brielle noticed the shift within days. Meetings she normally led were suddenly delegated to others. Her name was absent from new client briefs. When she asked Rick about it, he gave her a vague corporate answer, trying out some different structures. Her face in the break room lost its shine. The fake smiles. The pep talks. They began to fade. I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I was ice. On Wednesday, an email went out from our ethics compliance team, as part of a routine internal review of proprietary content use and project attributions. Several departments will be asked to submit documentation for the past 6 months of work. Brielle's color drained the moment she read it. I watched her open her inbox, fingers twitching. I knew what she was thinking. How much did they see? What if they find the redlined comments? The old pitch decks? The copy-pasted briefs? Her paranoia set in quick. She snapped at Marcus for forgetting a meeting. She cornered Julia from HR in the hallway, demanding to know why the review was happening now. She looked like someone who could hear the ice cracking beneath her stilettos. The IT department requested laptop audits. Nothing major, just a software check-in. Standard procedure. Except this time, it wasn't. They found browser history logs that didn't match project timelines. Metadata inconsistencies. Suspicious edits. Still no formal accusation. Just more silence. And more distance. Her team began withdrawing. People who once laughed at her jokes now exchanged glances over her shoulder. Whispers followed her into every meeting room. One night, I watched her storm out of the building past 7 p.m., her eyes red, makeup smudged, phone clutched in a death grip. I followed her out 5 minutes later, calm, methodical. She didn't even look back. On Friday, Rick called an emergency leadership meeting. Not an all hands. Just directors and select senior strategists. I was on the invite list. Brielle wasn't. At that meeting, Rick outlined a new accountability framework for team leads. He used phrases like rebuilding trust, ensuring credit integrity, and zero tolerance for misrepresentation. He didn't name her. He didn't have to. I knew by the end of the day, she'd hear everything. That night, at 11:38 p.m., I got a text from an unknown number. You think you've won. But you don't know everything. No name. No emoji. No punctuation. But I knew it was Brielle. And she was right. There were still pieces I didn't know, still shadows and corners I hadn't checked. But she was wrong about one thing. I hadn't won. I was still playing. And the endgame? Hadn't even started. The morning after that anonymous text, I walked into Stanton PR feeling the way generals must feel the day after a successful siege, alert, but not celebratory. Because if I knew Brielle, and after 2 years of watching her play polished predator, I did, she wouldn't go down with quiet shame. She'd scratch. She'd dig. And she'd try to drag me down with her. I wasn't wrong. That Monday, subtle tremors rippled through the office. I heard whispers, my name mentioned softly, like a warning. Brielle wasn't just panicking. She was preparing something. By Wednesday, the cracks became visible. A junior associate in the strategy department named Tessa, someone I'd mentored, approached me in the break room, hesitating over her cold brew. "Hey, just wanted to give you a heads up. Brielle's been asking questions about your old job. At Crestlight Media?" I froze, coffee in hand. That name hadn't crossed my mind in months. "She's trying to say you were fired? For breach of NDA or something?" Ah. So this was her angle. She was clawing through the past. And she'd found the one piece of history I'd buried carefully but not completely. The one black mark that wasn't actually black, but looked murky enough if twisted. I thanked Tessa quietly and went straight to my office. This was the counterstrike. Brielle was attempting her last move, character assassination by rumor, not fact. 2 years ago, I'd worked at Crestlight Media as a mid-tier brand strategist. I was sharp, maybe too sharp for that culture. When I discovered that the COO had been ghostwriting executive proposals for competing firms, double-dipping using inside data, I reported it. And guess what? They let me go. Not him. I left quietly, with a severance package and a slick NDA. No lawsuit. No scandal. Just silence. I took the lesson and moved on. But Brielle, she found the exit, not the entrance. She must have contacted someone from HR, maybe even greased the wheels with a few LinkedIn DMs. All she needed was a sentence out of context. All she needed was a shadow. Thursday morning, I walked into a tense office. People were looking, but not openly. The kind of glances that told you they wanted to ask something but were afraid the answer would bite back. Even Rick pulled me into his office around noon. "Alara," he began, fingers steepled, "Brielle's been making some insinuations. She's suggesting you were terminated from your previous firm due to questionable ethics. Something about an NDA breach?" I smiled, small, controlled. I was never fired. I resigned under pressure, after exposing internal misconduct involving client data sharing. I have documentation to prove it. Would you like me to forward it? He paused. That would be helpful. I opened my laptop right there and sent the email. Attached was the sanitized version of the exit package, the internal complaint I'd submitted, and the emails between me and legal counsel. All of it, timestamped, factual, clean. Rick skimmed it, nodding slowly. "You were a whistleblower?" "Not publicly. But yes." He looked up, frowning. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" "Because I prefer results over resumes. And because people like Brielle turn facts into weapons." He nodded once, sharply. "We're done here." That afternoon, HR requested a meeting with Brielle. She didn't come back for 3 hours. By the time she returned to her desk, her face was stone. No lipstick. Eyes sunken. She looked like someone who'd pulled a pin and thrown a grenade, only to realize it bounced off the wall and landed in her own lap. Here's what she didn't know: I'd been expecting her move for weeks. I'd built a timeline of my employment history, created a clean narrative, and quietly looped in my old lawyer just in case she got bold. I even knew she'd try the NDA angle, because I'd seen her do it once before, to a junior analyst at a different firm. That woman had ended up blackballed for a year. Not this time. I was ready. And the moment she made that call to Crestlight, my old contact flagged it. He sent me the transcript of her message request. So when HR cross-checked, not only did they find that her claim was exaggerated, they found she'd lied about her own job history, claiming she'd led a campaign for Rivington Skincare that she never touched. Turned out, the campaign director had been Eliza, who now worked at a rival agency and was more than happy to clarify the truth. Brielle had lit a match while standing in gasoline. By Friday, an official statement came down from leadership. Following internal review, Brielle Langley will no longer be with Stanton PR effective immediately. We wish her the best in future endeavors. No press release. No farewell email. She was just gone. Her office cleared out in under an hour. I watched from my window as she walked to the elevator, a box in her arms, shoulders back, but her chin low. No one spoke. No one hugged her. Even snakes get lonely when their fangs fail them. Later that day, Rick pulled me aside again. Alara, you didn't just survive a takedown attempt. You neutralized it without drama, without playing the victim, and without leaving a trail of bitterness. That's rare. And it's leadership material. I said nothing. I want you to consider taking over the new ethics and strategy integration role. It'll be official by next quarter. I think you'd be perfect. I looked at him. You're offering me the position that would have been Brielle's? No, he said. I'm offering you the position you were always meant to have. After Brielle's departure, the air inside Stanton PR changed, almost imperceptibly at first, like the moment after a storm when the clouds haven't yet parted, but the tension breaks. People started exhaling again. Conversations returned to casual, not cautious. My name stopped surfacing in whispers and started appearing in direct Slack mentions, group invites, client praise. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was ascending. Still, I didn't gloat. Not even privately. Because what happened to Brielle? It wasn't just about stolen promotions or gossip wars. It was about integrity. I hadn't set out to ruin her, I'd set out to protect the truth. And when you fight for truth, revenge isn't about explosions. It's about control. Quiet, precise, undeniable control. 1 week after her exit, I sat in the empty conference room Brielle used to hijack for urgent brainstorms. Same room, different energy. I looked out across downtown Denver's grid of high-rises and thought back on every turning point that led me here. Getting iced out of a promotion I earned. Watching a so-called friend weaponize charm like a scalpel. Walking a tightrope between silence and strategy. And finally, choosing the long game over the loud one. People underestimate the quiet ones. They think we're soft because we don't shout. They think we're naive because we don't retaliate right away. But we watch. We remember. We wait. And when we move like chess masters. The ethics and strategy integration role was now mine, official, with a contract and a 5-figure raise. I spent the first month restructuring how we handled project credit, promotion eligibility, and internal mentorship. My first major initiative? A new vetting system for campaign leadership that required documented client approvals and project transparency. No more shadow stealing. No more smoke and mirrors resumes. But there was one last thread I hadn't pulled, and I intended to. You see, Brielle wasn't just out of Stanton PR. She was trying to land at a rival firm in Portland, Chandler and Locke. I knew because one of their senior creative leads, Kayla Morgan, had reached out to me for a casual reference. A trap if I ever heard one. I could have torched Brielle with a few venomous sentences. But I didn't. I sent Kayla a simple note. Brielle Langley worked with us for 2 years. I recommend that any firm considering her for a leadership position request full documentation of her campaign contributions, as well as references from verified clients. You'll want to verify timelines carefully. That was it. No slander. No heat. Just truth, delivered like a scalpel to a balloon. 3 days later, Kayla replied, "Thanks, Alara. That told me everything I needed to know." Brielle's second chance just collapsed under its own weight. I never heard her name again after that. Power isn't always about the position you hold. It's about the peace you command. The way people walk into rooms when you're in them. The respect you earn when no one is watching. I used to think promotions were the prize. Now I know better. The prize is being the woman no one dares underestimate again. The prize is creating systems where no one else has to be burned the way I was. The prize is looking in the mirror, clear-eyed, spine straight, and liking the woman staring back. Brielle taught me that sometimes enemies are necessary. Not for revenge, but for refinement. They force us to step into our fullest strength. And mine? It isn't loud. It isn't cruel. It's undeniable. A year had passed. 12 months since Brielle's unraveling. Since I reclaimed what was mine, not just a job title, but the truth of who I was always meant to be, a strategist, a builder, a woman who moved with quiet conviction and deliberate grace. People often ask me what it felt like, finally winning after all that chaos. But that's the thing about real victories, they don't come with fireworks. They come in the silence, in the stillness. In watching your past self fade into something stronger, sharper. Something unshakable. And sometimes, if you're lucky, your reward isn't applause, it's the chance to pass that strength forward. She showed up 6 months ago. Fresh from grad school. Eager, bright-eyed, and wildly overqualified for the entry-level role they gave her. Her name was Maya Donnell, a name I'd remember after the first meeting because she asked questions no one else dared to ask in a room full of execs. She reminded me of me. The before version. The version still hoping that merit and manners were enough. I saw it in the way she bit her tongue when someone cut her off in meetings. I saw it in the way she stayed late to clean up decks that others took credit for. And I saw it, most painfully, in the way she smiled too quickly when dismissed. As if trying to convince herself she hadn't just been disrespected. So I did something no one did for me back then. I called her in. Not to correct. Not to critique. To guide. We started with coffee. Casual. She called me Ms. Vega the entire time until I finally laughed and said, "It's Alara, not your principal." Then I handed her a file I kept tucked into my desk drawer. It was labeled Strategy for Strategists, a document I created over the past year. Not corporate training fluff. Real tools. Notes on office power dynamics. Communication frameworks. What to watch. Who to avoid. When to speak. When silence is its own answer. "Why are you giving me this?" she asked, eyes wide. "Because you're about to walk into rooms where your intelligence will threaten people who mistake youth for weakness," I said. "This isn't about survival. It's about leverage." She didn't say anything at first. Just flipped through the pages like they were ancient scrolls. "Thank you," she whispered. But I could already see it, the shift. The fire. Maya didn't need saving. She needed strategy. And 6 months later, when she pitched a multi-platform branding revamp to one of our top tech clients, and nailed it with such precision our jaws dropped, I didn't smile out of pride. I smiled because I saw legacy in motion. You don't change toxic systems by burning them down. You change them by planting women like Maya in the soil. Women who will grow taller than you ever could, and remember who handed them the sunlight when everyone else offered shadows. That's how we win. Not once. Forever. If you're watching this thinking I've been betrayed too, or I'm still invisible, or I'm scared to play the game because it feels rigged, I see you. And I promise, you don't need to become ruthless to be powerful. You just need to be precise. And patient. And when the time comes, calculated. Because revenge isn't always fire and fury. Sometimes it's an open door, a steady hand, and a whispered truth that changes someone else's path forever. Sometimes, it's legacy. And that's the real win.